Hi there, welcome to the eCommerce Nurse podcast, our 26th episode. I'm Karina McLeod, ex-Amazonian and CEO and founder of eCommerce Nurse and Vendor Society. Today we're going to be talking about the journey from being an e-commerce seller to building one of Europe's leading e-commerce acquisition platforms. We have a special guest, Sam Horby, one of the co-founders of OLSAM, the Sam in OLSAM. OLSAM is a platform turbocharging brands in the digital world, pioneering a marketplace-first approach. OLSAM acquires and nurtures leading marketplace-first brands through innovative partnerships with e-commerce entrepreneurs. Once a part of their platform, brands tap into technology, data, and operational expertise custom-built to drive exponential revenue and profit growth. OLSAM's marketplace-first approach to digital brand building is unlocking the overlooked potential in the growing 2.7 trillion global marketplace economy. OLSAM is a growing global team sitting across 3 continents, 15 nationalities with deep e-commerce expertise, and has raised over $170 million from top-tier VC funds. Prior to starting OLSAM, Sam worked for Amazon in their marketplace team, helping hundreds of UK and EU SMEs trade on the marketplace. He also started and scaled a category-leading Amazon FBA business, scaling it to $700,000 turnover in 1.5 years before selling the brand in summer 2019. Hi, Sam. Big thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. I'm super excited to talk to you today about your journey. You have experienced phenomenal growth in such a short space of time, getting backing from investors within 7 months and since purchased and grown over 15 brands. So fantastic results.
Thanks very much for the wonderful introduction. It's great. It's great to be here. No, it's been a really incredible period over the last couple of years. The team has grown exponentially, as you mentioned on that introduction, across 3 continents now. We've acquired, numerous brands across a variety of different categories, and we're just getting started. So I think we're in a really exciting position to, look ahead to 2022 and beyond. Awesome.
Day one. So to start off, it would be good to share with our listeners a bit about your background. Of course, I've given a bit more sort of a background in terms of that introduction, but it'd be good to sort of really understand what led you to becoming an e-commerce aggregator.
Definitely. So I think the first thing I want to begin with is just kind of explain why we do what we do and why I'm so passionate about this ecosystem as a whole. So, globally, there's about 1.6 million of these entrepreneurs. These are mom and pop shop sellers. They are husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, all solopreneurs, all kinds of entrepreneurs. And, they are building profitable businesses from their bedroom, fully bootstrapped. And, the stories of how they fell into the space are personal, they're professional reasons, but they're always profound. And one of the best things in my job is listening to entrepreneurs as they come to us and share these stories. So the problem they have is, when they reach a certain point, typically like £2 million turnover is what we consistently hear, they hit a ceiling. And the ceiling is they don't have enough working capital to scale the business. They might need to hire a full-time team. Or they might have just fallen out of love with the brand and they want a fresh start and take the capital off the table. And the problem they've had is that there previously weren't any real buyers who would be able to essentially acquire the business off the seller, because you need to know how to operate these brands. Amazon, as you well know, is a complicated platform to trade on. Unless you know how to run these brands day to day, it's very challenging indeed. So typically they would either just essentially let the business wind down, or they would have to sell it to someone who kind of probably wanted to come into the space but didn't know how to run these businesses. So basically, fast forward from my Amazon days to I'm in New York in a totally separate job in a retail capacity, actually, bricks and mortar, helping a British startup. This is kind of early 2020, late 2019, and I saw what was going on in the US with early aggregators, as you call them, and there's one company in particular that was doing really well and getting tons of press. And we're growing profitably really, really fast. And I thought, this looks really awesome. They're doing it with FBA businesses. I know about FBA, but then I thought, I have no idea about M&A or finance or any of or that side of the business model. So I emailed Ollie, who's my brother and co-founder, And we started emailing back and forth. And then about March 2020, I'm sure you can picture where you were at March 2020. I certainly remember where I was, and I was in this apartment in New York, tiny apartment, and what turned into an amazing year was actually terrible. And changes to my job and a huge amount of change was going on. New York was hit really badly by COVID. Ollie, meanwhile, across in the UK, was doing a job in management consulting and used to travel the whole time, and then was grounded, couldn't fly. So he had tons of a bit more time on his hands. So we then started to flesh out this idea of, well, what if we could do this and support UK entrepreneurs and European entrepreneurs, and put together a deck. We'd never raised funding before, so that was an experience. And I ended up flying back to the UK to support Ollie. He was in a full-time job, so was I. Anyway, fast forward about 9 months to December 2020, and we just closed our seed round, our seed investment round, and we banged on 175 investor doors to raise the money. We had so many no's, but I knew we were well placed. Our skill sets were perfect, and you have to plug away, and you find someone who'll let you in. And this one individual was Christian Angermeyer, who is a German technology entrepreneur, really inspiring individual, and he gave us our seed funding, and allowed us to buy our first few brands and show we could actually do what we were saying we could do. Fast forward to now, we are March 2022, as you mentioned in the introduction. We've been through an incredible last couple of months. We've acquired numerous brands, a team of 50 people now with a really strong management team. I think one of the things that I have to reflect on is I don't know how to manage a 9-figure business. Like, that's the reality of my experience. So I need a team who do know how to do that and have skill sets I just don't have, which there are many. So be it supply chain, revenue management, advertising. So we have an amazing team now in place who can take care of all of this. And I'm really proud of how far we've come and the team we have behind us, and I think some of the best operators in Europe who know Amazon and e-commerce omni-channel really well. So it's been an absolute wild journey, but really happy where we are now and where we're headed.
It's a fantastic story from and the part I find really interesting is a lot of people will sit there and think, okay, you're successful, great. How do we do that? Something similar, and thinking that it all sort of just happened overnight and was really easy. The fact that you've just mentioned, and I wrote this down, that you knocked on 175 investors' doors. Those are the bits that are always hidden when people have success stories, because people don't understand necessarily what you go through and the persistence of, I know that we've got a good product. I know that someone is going to say yes, and then you get it, and then bang, it just booms. And believing in your company and your business plan, which is incredible. To get that within such a short space of time is amazing. And I guess it's a daunting task, going out and getting investors. I know we have investors knocking on our door, and just the whole thought of all of that just is complex. I mean, it's not every day everyone has gone through that. So can you talk me through sort of a bit about how you even got to that point where you felt confident to even knock on an investor's door?
I think the first thing to say is, I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I myself, like a lot of your listeners, probably have never, raised money from investors, capital investors. There's a whole new experience and a ton of learnings is what I kind of come away from. I think the first is that, all the big names and startups you see out on the news, all of those founders have also gone through the same as we have. They've had tons of no's. It's the nature of venture community. So don't think that Uber, Airbnb, and these guys haven't gone through the same. They definitely have, and the stories are really interesting. In our case, the challenge we had, and I'll be pretty honest about it, is they said, well, you guys have no track record. You've never started and scaled and sold a business. Why do I think you could do it with this one? And to be fair, we hadn't. So, I mean, there's a fair challenge. I mean, but I think, I guess what I'd say is make sure, so there are actually quite a few stages before you even get the money. There are a couple of stages to be wary of. And the first is, number one, if a investor says we want to invest in you guys, we really like your business, Karina, is amazing. The next stage after that is a term sheet where they'll present their essentially idea of what a deal could be, and it could be so bad that actually it's not going to work. So don't. Yeah. I'd say hold off. My learning is hold off from the celebrations until you've actually signed and money's in the bank, because there are so many stages in the conversation to get to that point. And then the second thing is, around just generally finding the right fit for you. You'll meet some investors who are amazing. You just click so well, and they'll share the same ambition you do. There's a great cultural fit. You feel like they're really bouncing off each other. That's a great thing. And I think, people should have a long-term, entrepreneurs should have a long-term outlook on their business. And I think do make sure you are getting into bed with an investor who is sharing that vision. Otherwise, I've read tons of stories of when it goes really badly. And in our case, it's been amazing. Our investors, Elevate Capital, are very involved day to day with Ollie and I. We wanted that because we've never run a company before. Some entrepreneurs may be like, look, that's not for me. That's also fine. But making sure you have that relationship very clear early on is important.
I think that's a really good point. And fit, people can just, as you say, get really excited about the opportunity, or this company these guys want to invest in us, etc. And just our journey of growing as an agency, where we've tripped up the most is when something hasn't been aligned with our core values or our fit as a company. And you don't realize sort of the impact that can have, because that can impact just how you work, the day-to-day, as you say. You want to be able to make sure that you click, you have that chemistry. So that's really, really interesting that you pull that out as well. And I think one other thing that is really interesting, like you say, you've never managed a business of your size right now, and it's fantastic that you are quite open about that, because there's a lot of time where egos can get involved, right, in terms of, oh no, I can do this, I've got it to here. And the fact that you want to reach out and learn from other people is almost helps you grow as a company as well, because that you need that help.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Ollie and I, we're not precious about, setting aside, the investment point. I think when it comes to hiring as well, I sort of wrote down all the things that I wasn't good at, and I kind of mapped out who can we hire in for this, or what skill sets do we need. And I'm really, because one of the piece of advice I got was like, you need to make yourself redundant as a founder. You need to just extricate yourself kind of out of some of the kind of potential bottlenecks of the business. And one of our most recent hires, a director of e-commerce from Mountain Warehouse, and he's tons of experience around demand planning and forecasting and new product development and launch. And this is all these things. This is amazing. I want to learn from you. And I think I'm really keen for areas where I need to develop on. I need to learn from other people. Otherwise, this business just won't grow at the speed that we need it to.
Yeah, definitely, completely. And that's, a real valid point. And I guess so you've grown from a team up to, as you mentioned, 50, and I imagine that's just constantly growing in such a short period of time. How do you scale with growth? How do you scale like that to make sure you've got the right hires, you've got the right team coming on board?
Yeah. So I mean, it's probably something to you is it all starts, I find, with, you hire or try and hire a really strong foundational team who essentially, build the businesses they want to build. I will never tell someone on a management team how they should run their business ever. So the key thing for us was to get a really strong management team in place to then hire beneath them. So stage one was hiring a really strong management team. That was very hard because we had one brand, Ollie and I, some investment, but of course in our space there were some huge numbers flying around. It comes quite advanced businesses in our ecosystem, so we had to differentiate ourselves. I think hiring that management team is really important. The next thing after that is making sure that whatever process you're doing now, you can it's scalable to in our case, the metric I use is like number of brands acquired a week. So I said we're acquiring say one brand a month, but imagine we're acquiring 2 brands a week. How does this process change? And it's the bit I struggle with the most actually is that scalable thinking. I'm people again in my team who are much better than I am at thinking about in this way, but anything that's slightly manual now will not scale. We have tools, and we have process reviews every month to think about, where are the bottlenecks, what can we improve in this particular area. And I think to give an actual example is around, the migration of a company. So we buy the business, the seller has received the funds. What happens now? And there's a ton of process that, integrating softwares, changing bank accounts, all this kind of manual hacky stuff that's really important. We're acquiring brands at the same time. So how do we then keep these processes running and the engine moving at the right pace, and keeping that seller experience good? They've had a very stressful process. So how do we keep the process moving and as smooth as possible? There's a team that's sole function is focused on doing that. But yeah, it's challenging.
Definitely. I mean, we're a lot smaller. We're about a team of 15, but just the gradual different transitional steps that you take, where almost you're having to catch up with infrastructure sometimes, but without that infrastructure, you can't grow further. And then your growth becomes, you'd plateau. And it's that constant continuous improvement that needs to go on in the background as well.
Exactly.
Which is there. And so when it comes down to the core function of your business is obviously identifying brands that you want to invest in. Can you talk more about sort of how do you identify the right brands for you? Because we've spoken before, and you mentioned something really interesting, and which comes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of fit. Because you could buy any brand and think, oh, that's great, we know it's going to double in sales, but there's more to it, right, in terms of making sure that that's the right brand for you as a company.
Yeah, really interesting topic this, because I think I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't buy 30, 40 brands a year. We're not a volume acquirer. We think you can build a fantastic company over the course of 3, 4, 5 years and take it slower. I think the way we look at acquisitions is in two parts. You have the seller entrepreneur and you have the brand. And for us, the two are as important as each other. And the reason is that, when we buy a business from someone, the relationship together is quite a long one, because there's the way the deals are structured in this space, not just with Allsam. You have a cash payment and you have an earn-out period. It's very standard in M&A anyway. And in that earn-out period, the seller needs to also make sure they like and get on with the acquirer, because what you don't want to find is that you think, I have to get on a call with Sam today. I'm just dreading this. And if that's how you feel, then for both parties, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I think the first thing as a seller is when you have these calls, or whether it's, you're a retailer or seller, you have to get the chemistry and the excitement when you're speaking with a potential exit partner, because the journey's long. It's like two potentially 3 years, and there've been times where we've said no to deals because we just think this is going to be super tricky. I think this is going to have a couple of challenges here. So we've done that in the past, and then I think so. The seller's really important. And obviously the business is really important. And I think to this point, for us, we don't just buy reviews and ratings and ranking. I think there are acquirers who do that, and that's a totally separate strategy. I think it's just not how we do it. We need to buy brands. And if the brand isn't perhaps as pronounced as it could be, do we back ourselves to make it more pronounced and targeted? And the second part is differentiation, and that's like IP, trademarks, through materials or brand story or whatever it may be. Because I think that is what ultimately will defend your product in an extremely competitive, transparent marketplace. And again, moving to the next, like the last couple of deals we've done, they've all had that. So they've had great reviews and ranking, but actually what they have that's really cool and unique is the IP around the design and all the materials.
Yeah, definitely. And branding's key as well, because I guess that just brings so much more opportunity. Yeah. And also,
I'm keen to ask, how do you select your clients and partners?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've definitely gone through some interesting times, because we've gone through that part where we haven't gone based on fit. We're like, oh yeah, we think we can grow this brand, etc., but our values are completely different, and that can always be a challenge, right? Because you're working regularly with the brand, you're helping them support, and so that chemistry and that relationship is key, and being on the same page in terms of expectations and everything, and being fully aligned is always important. So For us, it's also definitely about fit and making sure that that brand is aligned in terms of our core values as a company, and how we function. And also working with brands that are there for the long term. It's not, whenever we have a conversation with somebody that's interested in working with us and say, well, I want to get to X in 6 months. Okay, great. Where are you now? Oh, I haven't started. Okay, well, that's not going to, because we don't want to work with short-term opportunities. We want to help brands grow. And for a brand to really grow and be successful in our eyes, it's long-term. It's about getting momentum. It's about getting customer trust. It's about building on an overall portfolio. And so our focus is more about, fit, but also working with brands that know that you need to invest as well. When you work with brands and then you say, okay, how much have you got? What's your marketing budget like? Oh, well, we haven't got much to spend, but we want to be number one on Amazon. What can you do? Well, we're not doing black or grey hat tactics here. So you need to have, unfortunately, in this day and age, you need the budget to invest to make that happen. And so those are the sort of key things that we look at when working with brands. And we're getting there, and we've got some really good partnerships on. But you also learn sort of throughout stages, as in when those relationships aren't probably necessarily working for both parties as well, because it's got to work for the brands as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a really, and I think you allude to a point there where, it's an iterative process, and you're learning kind of your ideal partner as you're developing, as you're kind of continue to grow. I think it's something that as a company, you'll learn that it's the perfect fit.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty normal. I think it's an iterative process. So
yeah, definitely. And it's great when you do get that fit and you really build that rapport, because that's also longevity. It's a volatile industry. And retention is really important. You want to work with a partner where they want to work with someone that really understands their business. They don't want to be jumping from agency to agency. And you want to work with a company that, you really understand the brand. We've got brands that we've been working with for 4 or 5 years, and that's fantastic to see sort of where they were to where they are now. And you just really understand their product, which is fantastic.
Definitely.
So when you find the right fit and you've got the right brand on board, are you finding some clear, tried and tested strategies that you can then start applying to a wider range, to kind of all the brands then you start bringing on board?
Yeah. So I think part of the pitch at the seed stage was, we have a growth playbook that we can kind of scale across our brands, and I'm really pleased to say now that we've done these and done them many times, which is pretty cool. So, I think if we start with the kind of immediate, let's say short to medium term levers, in the sense that they can happen quite fast, is around marketing. So it's around, the product display pages, the advertising, the website itself. And we have an in-house creative team, and essentially post-acquisition, the first thing they'll do is build a customer avatar, really go into the weeds of who the customer is, and create a rebrand and totally optimize the page, and do iterative A/B testing for a period, and target that I guess conversion optimization on the platform. Advertising, as is another quick one. I say quick win. It takes, obviously, it's constantly iterative as well, but you can attack it straight away. And our team here is just amazing. They're so good at advertising on the 3P side. And again, it's something that sellers really struggle with, because the tools are constantly advancing so fast, and in terms of complexity and things like this. So our team is very involved in the ecosystem and know about all the PPC changes that are happening. But it does take time for them to get their arms around a campaign. It's a new campaign. The seller might know it really well. They've been running the business for like 4 years, so they're going to know what keywords work, what doesn't, what campaigns work, what don't. And so that communication piece between the seller and Allsam is really important. Guys, don't bother doing that. I've tried it. Otherwise we'll just do it again. So that's important. And then the long, I say, medium to long term is international expansion. So what we've been able to do very well is take UK brands, UK European native businesses, and launch them on .com quite successfully. And we've learned when it doesn't work, because we've had some failings, where somewhere it hasn't worked. And we just said, okay, well, why is that bombed so badly? What's happened? And the learnings we've taken from that, we can now really make sure that whenever we do it, especially around the planning stages, we get it as best as to do it as best we can. So stock optimization, content, the marketing execution point, and pricing and things like this are really key. And we've done that across really successfully now, across our our brands. So it's it's really cool.
And it sounds and it's about data driven. Like, we've been asked this question, well, why should we should do images like this and that, and we want it like this and that. And it's like, look, don't spend so much time figuring that out, because until you do your A/B testing, nobody here can answer that, because the data is going to give you the answers. We know what's worked with other brands, but you've got to A/B test, and interesting what you said about advertising. There is that point where, and we do see this in the industry where, agencies can promise the world, but you do need to admit, when you're taking on a new account, they've mastered it to some degree in terms of their knowledge. And then you've got to learn what they've gone through. And that communication, as you say, is important. Okay, you've tested these, it didn't work. Okay, that then saves us time in testing what we think, we would do, but you've done that, or did you do it that way? And the thing, there's this kind of story that I keep hearing from you, which I find is really important, and is that you're not afraid to fail and admit when things have gone wrong, and you assess them and review them and then go, okay, we've learned from that, let's go ahead. And that is fundamental. And I can see that really helps with growth, because it's that growth mindset of, okay, we've learned from that. It's okay. And I remember from the Amazon days, I mean, that was embedded in the Amazon days, right? Although you probably had to write, I don't know how many page documents when something didn't work out and report on it and everything. But that's something that is, really interesting to hear, and something that we've always applied.
Well, and I think it's something that, again, we can do much better, be much better at. And I think, I guess it's like kind of failing is so normal in a startup, and you have to embrace it, and you have to embrace it. If you don't, you're just going to grow really slowly. But I want to be far better at this, and be far more that keenness to fail forward, as they say, is something I'm really keen to become this year, definitely much better at.
Yeah. And in terms of that then, so lessons learned. If you were to do this, let's go fast forward, or not fast forward, rewind, wouldn't we? To 2 years ago, when you started and you had this idea in March 2020. What are the key things that you would do differently? Would you tell yourself, okay, let's change that based on what you've learned today?
A lot. I'd say what it would be. I'd say the first learning and the first thing I would tell myself is, again, it's okay to fail, because I come from companies where failing is fine, but it's in a safe environment. And I was a huge company, and I was working at another startup which was still pretty big. It's a listed company, so it's big. A startup is highly volatile, highly choppy, and sometimes it was my first ever startup. So a lot of the issues we found are kind of heightened. And so I think the first thing I'd say is, it's okay to make errors. You're never going to get everything right. Is the first one. The second thing is I wish I'd hired a head of people much sooner. She's just joined now at 52 people, and she should have joined at 5, because the challenge of that really fast in a year, is that the cracks appear. It's natural. Processes that used to work don't work. That's normal in a startup. But the important thing is, you've got to have someone who's there sweeping and watching what's going on, and making sure the team has an adequate learning and development budget, is supported with out of work stuff. There's a lot of I've been privy to a lot of out of work issues that I now makes me appreciate what goes on behind the scenes. And actually, not doing well at work, there's a reason for that. It's not because of your day jobs, because it's personal stuff. I wish we'd had a head of people to help us with that, and I should have prioritized it. And I think that the final one is I think is around not so much a learning, but actually I'm really glad I have this, is transparency with your co-founder, because you go through really highs and lows, and the lows are really low, and the highs are like amazing. And in those tough times, you have to communicate how you're feeling. And so Ollie and I, you have debriefs every day about how you're feeling, what's going on, and you just constantly gauge each other and feel how you, and have a very open channel of communication. I can't read his mind. He's quite a different guy to me, so he can't read me. So, but it's really important that I know how he's feeling, he knows what I'm feeling, so we can always share in the moments. And because what happens is that rubs off on the team, and the team are constantly looking and feeling how we're feeling. And if I'm having a bad day, they'll feel it. And it's really important that I feel supported. And ultimately, Ollie's the only one who's going to really care if how I'm getting on. The team just wants us to make sure we're performing. So I think I'm very happy that, one, my brother is a great co-founder, otherwise it would have been a challenge. I think very carefully if you're going to business with a sibling. But two, is around transparency and communication with your co-founders is really important.
I think that's they're all such important things that you've highlighted, and I couldn't agree more with everything you've pulled out, just from my side of things as well. I mean, I don't have a co-founder, I am the founder, and it gets lonely.
I think that would be hard. Yeah.
It gets lonely because there are the highs and lows, and I always joke and call it a roller coaster. Sometimes that's a roller coaster, but you don't necessarily have someone to share that with. And those highs are great, but those lows, and really what you said is fantastic in terms of it's important that you acknowledge them and ensure that doesn't impact, like you're having a bad day, all of a sudden a key client of yours no longer can work with you, right? There's, the pandemic, Brexit, there has been a boom, but there has also been businesses impacted. So we can't shy away from that. Everybody might be on LinkedIn saying everything's fantastic, but there is another reality going on in the economy. And then it hits, and then you got to think, well, how do I bring this onto the team to make sure that this doesn't deflate the team? It makes them keep them going and keep that spirit, which then comes into what you mentioned with a head of people. And that's, people are so important, and we've definitely had to invest. We've invested. We've got our HR manager, who is absolutely fantastic in terms of just making sure that everyone is okay, because that's important. As well.
It's really important. I think when I've seen the team operating at the best is when they are happiest. And likewise, when I sense there are challenges, because you see the stress, it's processes and you need help, there's always a reason. And it's and people just in our particular business, like yours as well, it comes down to expertise and operational ability. That's fundamentally what it boils down to. Super smart, fantastic people, and you've got to retain them. And as you just mentioned just now, in the current environment, e-commerce and retail expertise is in hot demand. And I've no doubt your team is, best in the biz. And, and as I said to you before we had this call, I know my team is probably being pinged left, right, and center by recruiters. I'm not naive to that. But the point is that at Allsam, they have to feel that they're learning, and but also looked after as well. It's really important that. And I've had amazing bosses and not so good ones. And that's pretty normal. But I hope at Allsam, we're building a company where people really like where they work, and we've got a lot of way to go. But I think that's the aim anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's all fantastic. And I love your story. I can actually really resonate with some parts. Of course, I can't resonate to getting the funding that you have and the size that you are now, but I know that that some of the day-to-day challenges that you've experienced as well. And I think it's great that you're so open in sharing those. So before we wrap up, I always sort of ask one last question in terms of a tip. So if there were people listening that are thinking, all right, I want to sell my business, how do I go about it? What would be that one tip that you would give to somebody looking to create an exit plan?
So I'd say the first thing is, make sure you've got really clean financials. It sounds really boring. That's the first thing. You've got to know your numbers inside out. Have really, really clean financials. Go to an accountant if you don't have one, and invest in that process. And then meet with acquirers, meet with buyers, get to know the different types, get to know them, meet them for coffees, lunches. It's a very personal experience, and make sure you feel that money being one thing, make sure you really, as I said early on in this podcast, that you feel like there's a good chemistry. And then I'd say get mentally prepared, because honestly, the feeling is this is your baby. I appreciate, for a lot of your listeners, like you've built these brands from scratch. They are extremely important to them, and selling it is a deeply personal experience. So speak with other sellers, get to know how their experience was, get to know how it feels after they no longer own the business. It might be a good feeling, but it's a pretty awesome one, because you now sort of have, you know, a first exit and a lot of capital to then deploy in your next venture. So I'd say that those are 3 things, not 1, but.
Awesome. No, that is all. So clear financials, make sure you know your numbers. And yeah, as you say, it is your baby. And I think people get sort of like, oh, I want to sell it, I sell it. But actually, the reality of letting go of that is completely different. And as you say, it's really important finding the right partner. And I like that in terms of getting to know those other companies, because it is more personal. It isn't just sort of sitting there in suits behind a desk. It is important because you're going to be working with them. And it wasn't until recently that I realized I really understood about this earnout period. You know, didn't realize a lot of people always sell it and leg it. It doesn't work like that. And so it becomes even more important. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, for being a fantastic guest today and for sharing your journey with our listeners. And for those listening, if you want to understand more about selling your e-commerce or Amazon business, you'll find the link in the description of the podcast to reach out to old Sam directly. And also, if you need support growing your Amazon business and getting it investor ready, eCommerce Nurse is there to support you. So thanks, Sam, and thank you, listeners.
Thanks very much.